Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about Congress MLAs in Goa defecting and joining the BJP despite making emphatic pledges to different gods and signing affidavits that they would not do so. We also talk about India's health expenditure and what a recent report about it reveals. But first, we talk about the BCCI, the main governing body for cricket in India. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court gave an order that would now allow cricket administrators to hold office in state units and the BCCI for 12 years in succession. Earlier, this period was just 6 years. And the thing to note is that this has been a contentious issue for the cricket administration for the past 6 years. The BCCI has been fighting to make this period longer and dilute the recommendations that were made by the Lodha committee, which was formed so that the administration would have the required checks and balances. The latest decision by the court is also important because it effectively allows the BCCI president Sourav Ganguly to stay in power for a longer period and also sets the stage for Secretary Jay Shah to become the next president. In this segment, Indian Express's national sports editor Sandeep Dwivedi joins us to talk about the order. Sandeep, about 6 years ago, it was the Lodha committee that had made recommendations that people in top positions at the BCCI should not occupy their individual positions for a long time. Could you begin by talking about what had led it to make this recommendation?
Right, so people talk about 2016 as the starting point, but I think we need to go at least 3 years back. It was in 2013 when the IPL spot fixing scandal was started. And I think this is what led to people in the BCCI going to court, and that is where the court intervention started.
It was ball-by-ball fixing. In fact, according to sources, fixers wanted Rajasthan bowler Ankit Chavan to give 13 or more runs on his second over. Well, the third over of the match that was.
The Delhi police today presented visual evidence supplementing the wiretaps that show how signals were decided between bookies and players. Irrefutable evidence seems to be stacked against the three arrested players.
Rajasthan cricketer Ajit Chandela has been slammed with lifetime ban and Mumbai cricketer Hiten Shah with 5 years of ban in connection with the 2013 IPL spot fixing scandal. The BCCI
now, after it went to court, the Supreme Court made a Mudgal commission, like that was to probe the spot fixing. Now, they concluded that there were massive issues with the BCCI. So, Lodha wasn't the probe panel. Lodha committee was formed so that they can have checks and balances within the BCCI so that these things don't get repeated. So, Lodha had they went on for about a year or so. They spoke close to 80 people across the board, say journalists, editors and office bearers and lots of players, top players including Kapil Dev, Rahul Dravid, everybody they spoke to just to understand how BCCI works and what they need to do. After that, they gave an extensive report to the Supreme Court that these are the things we need to do to ensure good governance within the BCCI so these things don't get repeated. So the courts were so impressed by the report that they said that this report will be virtually the Supreme Court order. So everything the report said was implemented. And among this, I think the most important thing which I think Justice R.M. Lodha spoke to the Indian Express yesterday on the day of the verdict, and he said cooling period was the pillar of good governance, because unless and until you don't fix a tenure for the office bearer, it becomes extremely difficult. If they have unending tenure, then the monopoly increases. You always need fresh blood. People need to be accountable. Only a democracy is in place. So cooling period that way is way too important. And this is what Lodha and the Supreme Court verdict both underlined.
And Sandeep, could you talk about how long was the period that the Lodha committee had initially recommended for cricket administrators?
So if you go to the original Supreme Court order of 2016, Lodha had made it pretty clear that you have to have a cooling period after 3 years, and you can have 3 such tenures. So you work for 3 years, you move, somebody else comes, you wait for 3 years, again you can come. So they are not closing the doors on you, but they wanted continuity. Now what happened was BCCI was of course not at all impressed by this. They challenged it. Now in 2018, they again went to court and the court again agreed that okay, we'll tweak it. Okay, we'll now make it 6 years. But 6 years is a total of BCCI and state. So in case if you have 4 years in the state, you can have 2 more years in BCCI and then you quit, or you have your cooling period. Now BCCI wasn't impressed with that also, understandably so. So they again went to the court, and now seen is that they can have at least 12 years. That is 6 in the BCCI, 6 in the state board, and only then they'll have a cooling period. So I think it's understandable, like BCCI wants a longer tenure and the court has obliged them here.
Also, if you are a top BCCI official, what exactly can you not do during the cooling off period?
So you can be a regular member. You can't be an office bearer. You can't be a decision maker, if I say in a very simple words. Like you have the president, you have the secretary, you have the joint secretary, you have the treasurer. These are the key guys in any organization, right? Or like you can continue to be a regular member in the sense you can get passes for the games, but beyond that you won't have power to change things, right? So your vision can't be implemented. You can have a voice there, but you can't make decisions. So that is the most important thing. And again, like, see, we are talking about a very, very influential board, a very rich board. Here we are talking about decisions which can have far-reaching impacts. You become way too powerful. And as in BCCI or as in any organizations, you can be the most influential of the office bearers. But once you don't have the power to make the decisions, you're not at all important. So that is the main reason that, so once you are in the cooling period, you can be reduced to a nobody in BCCI, which is not easy thing to swallow for anybody who has been in power. And if you are in power in BCCI, the kind of influences, the kind of people you can oblige is unlimited, right? Like if I can give you a pass for, you will be my friend for the rest of my life, isn't it? So that's the power of cricket in India, and like that is the reason.
Okay, so the Lodha committee wanted that no top official should be in power for more than 3 years. And this is what the BCCI has fought for all these years, and they have managed to make this period longer. But what is their reasoning behind wanting tenures to be longer?
See, it's very simple. See, problem is this debate will once again be reduced to a battle between a hero and a villain. And BCCI, as usual, will be seen as a villain. You need to understand this. It's not that simple. It's not a black and white kind of a debate where you say that, okay, the court are the good guys, the BCCI are the bad guys, they are the power hungry guys, they are the rich guys, they want to stay in power, they want to make money. But it's not like that. Now you consider something very simple. Now suppose if you are BCCI and you are actually an able administrator who want to do things which for the betterment of cricket, you want to build this massive stadium in your state unit, right? Now you have a tenure for 3 years. You are the most influential guy in the board, but after 3 years, you have to step down. So the kind of influence you can have, the kind of vision you had for that stadium wouldn't be followed. So it will be a flawed project. Now this is one part of it, like this for a state unit. Now imagine you are BCCI's representative at the ICC. Now ICC is the World Cricket Body where all the big decisions are being made. Now suppose if I just go there for 3 years, boss, that's a big boys club. You need to be a regular there. You need to be friends with people there. You need to show your influence there. You need to work around the other members. For that, again, you need time. Like in case if we have a big wig who's going there regularly for say 3 years, 4 years, 6 years. Now, in case if somebody else goes who's just very raw, very naive, he or she doesn't understand the whole nuance of international cricket. Now, he'll find it very difficult to make his point across there. And that is where India's interest may be impacted because of this, because you don't have the right guy who's going there. So then it becomes difficult.
Basically, all the groundwork that the person has laid during his or her tenure, they can't follow through with that.
Exactly. Now, I'll give a simple example now in the sense like go back in time, like Jagmohan Dalmia, a guy who changed Indian cricket. Like World Cup always used to happen in England. Like first 3 World Cups happened in England. Asia, despite its massive support, massive money, they didn't have the World Cup there. Now people like Dalmia and KP Salve, they kept going to ICC, kept debating that we are important, we need to get the World Cup in India. Now imagine if Dalmia was there for just 3 years and you send somebody else there, he won't have a chance of getting. So it's a kind of a difficult situation in the sense if you are an able administrator, you can argue that. But in case if you are not and you want to just hold on to that position just because of the gains, then it's not the right argument. So it's not black and white. BCCI has logic in saying that you need continuity. But at the same time, what Lodha said or what the Supreme Court said about monopoly about in case if somebody is there for a longer period of time and he has vested interest, there are chances that he would not allow others to enter, and which is not good for any institution or an organization.
And now that these provisions have been watered down, and the Supreme Court has ruled that cricket administrators can have an unbroken combined stint of 12 years in state units and the BCCI, could you talk about what this decision means for the current people in power, specifically BCCI President Saurav Ganguly and Secretary Jay Shah?
So it's easy, like they get one more term, which is like till 2025, they'll be around. Most importantly, they'll be around when India hosts the all-important 50 overs World Cup the next year. So you want to be seen around. So these are important things for people in power. See, again, like you also need to understand, like say Jay Shah. Jay Shah is part of a political family. His father is in the position of power in the government of the day. He's the home minister. So these things kind of help. And even his father, like Amit Shah, he has been a former Gujarat Cricket Association member. So these guys are tuned into cricket. They have this massive stadium in Ahmedabad which has come up during their reign. So these things are important for them. See, even if you want to host a cricket match in your building society, it's difficult to arrange for a ground. You have to speak to your local association. There will be some people who won't be keen. So you'll have to work around them to organize. Now imagine a World Cup match of that scale. So many visa issues, so many logistics, flights, permissions, like they are endless. Like you need to get the cops there, the security there, all these things. Now for a lay person who's just an able administrator, like with no influence, no power, it's very difficult for him to organize a cricket match in India, trust me. So to say that we don't need these kind of influential people is wrong. We need them. And I think one of the things which another amendment in this present hearing was now they have allowed public servants, in the sense the MPs and the MLAs. Earlier it was not. They were not allowed to be BCCI functionaries. Now they can. So your question was about Jay Shah and Saurav Ganguly. There will be an election in September very soon. See, again, like tenure doesn't mean that, okay, like you have a tenure for 2 years. It doesn't mean automatically anybody who becomes the president will be there for 2 years. There are elections every year. These things only come into place in case you win those elections. So they will be again going for elections this month end in September, where in case Jay Shah or Saurav Ganguly, they get elected, they are entitled for one more tenure in case they win, right?
And the thing is that Jay Shah is in a good position to become the next BCCI president, right? Because he does have a lot of backing from the state associations.
Yeah, for a reason. Exactly the reason I told you. Now, if you see the whole legacy, like who has been the face of this hearing, this whole BCCI battle, like this was a massive thing for them. Like it's a big win for BCCI. So this win was achieved with Jay Shah around, and there can't be a debate, or it's an open secret that who calls the shot in BCCI. It is not the president Saurav Ganguly, it is Jay Shah. So the cricket is run from Motera, Ahmedabad, not from Eden Gardens. It's an open secret. You ask anybody, they'll tell you. So Jay Shah is being seen as the face, or the guy who pulled it off, or the BCCI administrator were almost facing an existential crisis where whether their future was not sure, like how long they could stay. Now, in case this guy has pulled off, like, okay, like you guys can stay for 12 years either in state or in BCCI. So yeah, that's a huge thing for him. Anyway, he was influential. Anyway, everybody knew like who was calling the shots. Now with this win, he becomes much more powerful. So in case if Jay Shah wishes, he can be the next BCCI president. I don't see any opposition. I don't see any election. It will be a unanimous election. It will be a no contest.
And next we talk about Goa. On Wednesday, 8 out of the 11 MLAs of the Congress party in Goa defected to join the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party. Now, this is not the first time that the Congress members have defected to the BJP. And in fact, defections are so common in Goa that this move didn't really come as a surprise to people. And this is despite the fact that these leaders had repeatedly made pledges that they would not do this. In this segment, we speak to Indian Express's Mayura Janwalkar about these defections and what they mean for the BJP going forward. Mayura, right now these 8 Congress MLAs have defected to the BJP. But even back in 2019, the Congress had made a similar move, right? Could you begin by talking about what had happened back then?
So speaking of 2019, this is the first time that this kind of a defection happened in Goa. And this was also not just from one party, but two. In 2019, 10 Congress MLAs and 2 Maharashtravadi Gomantak Party MLAs had similarly defected to the BJP, which means 2/3 of their MLAs just hopped over from Congress and MGP to the BJP. So of 15 Congress MLAs, 10 defected to the BJP, and of 3 MGP MLAs, 2 defected to the BJP. And with this, the BJP's number of MLAs in the Goa Legislative Assembly climbed to 27. And this is a 40-member house. So when this happened, of course, it happened out of nowhere and people reacted to it very strongly. And the Congress also filed disqualification petitions against these MLAs who defected, and so did the MGP. But these petitions remained pending before the Speaker for a very long time. And then after a direction from the Supreme Court, the Speaker finally took a decision and dismissed disqualification petitions. But then the legality of this move was tested in the High Court, in the Bombay High Court, its Goa bench. And the High Court eventually ruled that the Speaker's decision was absolutely right, and it dismissed the petitions filed by the Congress. But the issue still remains under legal contest before the Supreme Court.
Right, and now, of course, this has happened again with the 8 MLAs going over to the BJP. And this has happened even though right before the Goa Assembly elections, many of these MLAs had gone to temples and churches and had made pledges that they would not defect. And yet, here we are again. And in this regard, you spoke to Congress leader and former Goa Chief Minister Digambar Kamath. What did he have to say about it?
Well, I know that they had taken these oaths before the election, and that was an unprecedented move for the Congress to collect its election candidates, go from a temple to a church to a dargah, make them take this oath before the deities, and also make them sign affidavits later saying that they will stay with the Congress if they are elected on a Congress ticket. Now, clearly, after what happened yesterday, it appeared that nothing was really sacred. So when we asked the defecting MLAs about, what about the oaths that you took before God? Very interestingly, Digambar Kamath, who is a former Congress Chief Minister of Goa and who, just walked over to the BJP yesterday, he said that he went before God one more time. And he said that he was thinking about going to the BJP. And in his words, he said that God told me, you go ahead, don't worry. And that's how he is in the BJP now. And the other MLAs, Michael Lobo, Delilah Lobo, Alex Sequeira and Kedar Naik, these guys who also moved to the BJP yesterday with Digambar Kamath and Michael Lobo, they said that the circumstances were different at the time that we took the oath. And the idea was to win the election and stay in power and keep BJP out of power. But if BJP is already in power, then what's the point? Now, this is their explanation for their move. But, clearly with this one move, they've rendered their prayers or oaths that they took before God insincere.
And Mayura, when talking about people defecting to the BJP, how much of this has to do with the BJP leadership and the current Chief Minister Pramod Sawant?
So this would definitely be a feather in his cap, in the Chief Minister Pramod Sawant's cap, to consolidate his position in the party. This is the second time under his leadership that such a thing has happened, that the BJP's numbers in the 40-member Goa Assembly have risen in one stroke. In 2019, he added 12 MLAs to the BJP, and now in 2022, he has added another 8. So the BJP that had 20 MLAs of its own after winning this election in February now has 28 with yesterday's defection. So you can see that both the times it was under Pramod Sawant's leadership.
Right, and these latest defections have not exactly come as a surprise to anyone, because we know that in July as well, Congress did attempt something like this. Talk about what had happened then.
Right. So in July, it was attempted, but somehow it did not go through. And the Congress had managed to, avert a disaster of sorts at that time because 8 MLAs could not come together to defect. And, in order to dodge the anti-defection law, you need 2/3 of the MLAs to switch over to the other party. So at that time, the Congress could not collect 8. And maybe that's why this attempt was foiled. And the Congress at that time attacked Digambar Kamath and Michael Lobo, accused them of engineering this defection, called them conspirators, traitors. But a day later, it seemed to have blown over and they were in the party. They kept saying we're in the party, we're with the Congress party. So it seemed at that time that, this sort of a defection which went through yesterday was going to be an eventuality. They had kept the pot simmering for the last 2 months and it eventually happened yesterday. So it didn't take too many people by surprise.
And Mayura, how much of these defections have to do with the BJP wanting this to happen and the party keeping an eye out for the 2024 Lok Sabha elections?
So the position that the BJP has been taking in that this is not their doing. They didn't invite anybody to join their party. Those who have come to their party have come of their own accord, of their own will, because they're attracted to the good work that the party has been doing in Goa and at the center. And in July when, defection was attempted, at that time the BJP had said, we don't need anybody. We have a stable government in Goa. We have 20 MLAs of our own and we have support from 5 others. So our government is stable. We don't need any more MLAs. But then on Wednesday, when this defection actually took place and, you asked Pramod Sawant, what happened? You didn't need any more MLAs. So why have you taken in 8 more people into your party? So he said that if people are willing to come and join us, then they are welcome. Like, we didn't go seeking these people out, but they came to us because they are so drawn to the great work that the BJP government had been doing in Goa and at the center that they want to be a part of it. So if that's what they want to do, then they are welcome. So that also changed, in a span of 2 months. The BJP's take on that also changed when it welcomed 8 of these defectors into the party fold yesterday.
This seems a bit like heads I win, tails you lose sort of logic.
Yeah, pretty much that.
Okay, so the BJP is not saying anything about its plans. But how will these defections help the party?
So 8 Congress MLAs were inducted into the BJP on Wednesday at its headquarters in Panjim. And Pramod Sawant, the chief minister who was also present for this induction ceremony, he said right after the induction that they are absolutely confident that in the Lok Sabha elections, the BJP would win both the parliamentary seats in Goa.
There are 2 parliamentary seats in Goa, North and South. Right now, the North is headed by a BJP MLA, but the South has a Congress leader in power. And this is the seat that the BJP has been really trying to win.
But the BJP had to work hard in the South Goa, that is, Catholic dominated, as compared to North Goa, and particularly the taluka of Salset. It has 8 assembly constituencies in it, and it's a part of the South Goa parliamentary seat.
She says that over the years, this taluka has been decisive in determining the outcome of elections. Now, the thing to note is that Congress leader Digambar Kamath, who has now defected to the BJP, his bastion is Madgaon, which is part of Salset. Mayura says that he has been elected from it 8 times. So with the help of Kamath, BJP has a better chance of winning South Goa.
And along with Digambar Kamath, they also have former Minister Alex Sequeira who joined them. And he's also an MLA from Salset. And the BJP is now more hopeful of getting more votes in South Goa in the Lok Sabha election of 2024.
And in the end, we talk about health. Earlier this week, the National Health Accounts, or NHA, came out with its latest report. The report details how much and in what way the country spends on healthcare. This includes expenditure by the government, private sector, individuals, and NGOs. In this segment, Indian Express's Anonna Dutt, who reports on health for the paper, joins us to talk about the findings of this report.
So the report that was released earlier this week, it is from financial year 2019. The health estimates usually run a couple of years behind the calendar. So the main findings of the report, one of the main findings is the government spending, if we look at it. That has actually gone down a little from previous year by almost 0.07%. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when we talk about our GDP, even a point percentage is quite a bit.
Yeah, because India famously spends very little on health, right? Like barely 1% of its GDP.
So that is actually one of the main findings, that this year the government spending as percentage of the GDP has come to 1.28%, which was last financial year 2018, they said that it was 1.35%. So now why that happened? So we spoke to some experts and they explained that that happened because if we take a look at the last time's report, that had a huge amount of expenditure by the Defense Ministry for procurement of equipment. Now, that's a one-time purchase. That's not going to happen every year. And hence, we've seen this drop. But I mean, what the figures, if we look at the 5-year trend, generally shows is that the health spending has been low. Like you said, it has been chronically low from the government's end.
Okay, and besides this, the other thing that the report talks about is out-of-pocket expenditure. Could you talk about what that is and what the report says about it?
So that's one of the most important parameters when it comes to the health expenses, because that accounts for what you actually end up paying at the hospital. If you go to a hospital right now, what would you pay them? And that would be even things that you would pay for other than the insurance, even if you have, and not many people have insurance. So even if you have insurance, you would end up paying for certain medicines, tests, etc. So this amount accounts for how much a person in India spends. And why this is an important indicator is because India is actually one of the developing countries with quite a high out-of-pocket expenditure. You know, everybody like Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they have less out-of-pocket expenditure than us. So if we look at the report again, there has been a decline in the out-of-pocket expenditure also. So the 2018 financial year reported it as 48.8% of the total health expenditure was out-of-pocket. And this time it's 48.2. So that's a slight reduction, but there is a reduction. But what is concerning is that in the financial year 2018 report, there was a 10 percentage point drop from the previous year's report. And there wasn't such a high jump in any other, it's not like, people are not spending, but the government is taking over that spending. That did not happen. And that is what has been concerning a lot of people. Why is there a drop? And also what the report shows is that this drop in out-of-pocket expenditure, which was seen, the 10 percentage point, it is also happening along with a trend of decline in total health expenditure. So what we spend in total, the government, private sector, out-of-pocket, everything together has also been coming down over the years as percentage of the GDP.
Okay, so people are spending less from their pockets and the total expenditure on health is also decreasing. Do we know the reason for that?
So again, we asked the experts, why is that? And they said that if we look at the NSSO data, which is where they get their out-of-pocket expenditure data from, there has been a decline in the number of people who are seeking healthcare.
Oh, so this doesn't have so much to do with overall healthcare dramatically improving or people getting much better insurances. It's just that less people are seeking healthcare services. Do we know why that might be the case?
So we do not have any study to show that. We don't ask this question, why aren't you going? But clearly what they say is that this shows that there is a distress in the system, that people aren't willing to, either it's not accessible to them or it's just so expensive that they cannot afford. So they would go there as a last resort. And that's the thing, whenever we see this decline in out-of-pocket expenditure coupled with increase in government funding, there's actually an increase in the number of people availing the services. If you see in Delhi, very simple example, the Kejriwal government said, okay, we'll make everything free. More people turned up. I mean, I'm not talking about on-ground reality, but the thing is, once they said that it's free, more people turned up. So that is what we should have seen, but we've seen the opposite. We have seen a decline in the number of people going to the healthcare facilities.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.